A military force has no constant formation. Water has no constant shape. The ability to gain victory by changing and adapting according to the opponent is called genius. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Sun Tzu's idea of adapting, as if we were to be like water, taking shape of the vessel that we were placed in, can be extended far beyond the confines of war tactics. I keep this principle in mind throughout many areas of my life, even when it comes to planning motorcycle adventures. Most of my motorcycle trips start with a simple choice of which cardinal direction to point my hypothetical compass toward: north, south, east, or west. I try not to plan every little detail of the itinerary, but rather focus on general areas that I want to explore and how long it takes to get to those areas. How do I typically put together a general structure for my trip? Well, I scroll through Google Maps, identifying areas that are more mountainous, forested, isolated, or offer coastal roads. Once I have some general areas I'd like to ride, I pan through those areas to find roads that traverse through the most isolated parts. Roads to nowhere, roads to less populated areas, roads that cut through national forest or protected areas, roads that meander along a river or flow with the character of the environment. These are the qualities of roads that I value and find enjoyable to ride. During planning, I make myself aware of what areas I can camp in and the regulations around it, or for more populated environments, identify areas that are more likely to have hotels. Rarely do I book anything in advance in order to remain flexible and not bound to a strict itinerary. I find that the optionality and flexibility of this specific methodology leads to a trip that feels more like a natural adventure rather than a checklist of items. And nearly every motorcycle trip that I've taken that's been longer than a few days, I've had to pivot in some capacity. Why? Well, weather, unmet expectations, traffic, unexpected bike or road issues have all contributed to me shifting my plans around in order to enjoy my trip more. Weather has certainly been the most consistent deterror of plans in my experience. I've run into an unexpected snowstorm in Canada, plenty of severe thunderstorms in the Rocky Mountains, a tornado in Oklahoma, and more drops of rain than revolutions per minute. But for this trip, as the brisk fall weather began to set in New York City, I figured that driving south might bring me back to the sunshine and warmth of summertime that I was searching for. So I set my sights on South Carolina and Georgia, two states that I've never visited before. My initial plan was to drive to Charleston, Savannah, enjoy the comforts and food of those charming cities, and then explore the islands, beaches, and low country. Then I planned on swinging over to the western part of South Carolina and exploring some of the less populated regions of the state. I motorcycled my way down to Charleston, about 800 miles without issue. Spent a few days finding the best coffee and food that I could find, and spending some time in Santee Coastal Reserve, as well as riding along the coast. I made my way down to St. Helena and Hunting Island, close to the Georgia border. I was at a gas station filling up my Triumph Bonneville, and another customer approached me and said, "Hey, I saw your New York plates and your camping gear, so I figured you're traveling. Well, we're about to get hit with a Category 4 hurricane in about 48 hours, so you might want to think about heading inland and finding a place to bunker down for a few days." I hadn't been checking my phone too often, the result of being on a motorcycle for most of my days. Plus, I assumed since Hurricane Ian was hitting the Gulf side of Florida, it would potentially lose its steam by the time that it cut to South Carolina. Yet all of the local news sources were warning people to evacuate due to the 100-mile-per-hour plus winds that were coming and the potential 20 feet plus storm surge flooding that could happen. So of course, I had to pivot. The next morning, I jumped on the highway and drove 500 miles to Virginia to avoid the storm and salvage the remainder of my trip. I'd been to Shenandoah National Park before and knew how glorious Skyline Drive was, the winding road that runs from the top of the national park all the way to the bottom. It was significantly colder than South Carolina, but it did buy me an additional 48 hours before the remnants of Hurricane Ian would reach me. Because of my lack of rigid planning, I was able to make adjustments that would improve my motorcycle trip, rather than be stuck in a hotel or cancel my trip. And all I had to do was allow my motorcycle adventure to adapt to the shape of the vessel that I was given.